Alrighty, I think we can go ahead and get the party rolling. Hello, everyone. We're starting a bit early today. Welcome back to our Fionna and Cake discussion live streams. We are here to talk about episodes 3 and 4 of Fionna and Cake, titled Cake the Cat and Prismo the Wishmaster. I am joined once again by my lovely co-host, my brother from across the pond, all the way over in that foreign distant land with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think that's where that book takes place. I don't know why that came into my head first thing, but Tom, you're here with us today again. Hello, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, that was a bit of a deep cut. Who's still thinking about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Apparently, that was the first English thing that came to my mind, apparently. Let's see, we got folks in the chat here as well. Magical is here, Marcelo is here, Toon is here as well. I thought you've got way more to say about episodes 4 and 3. I feel like I have both more to say and less to say. I don't know I don't know how that makes sense.
That doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense. But I feel like I have like fewer sort of buckets of topics to talk about, but I have just like a ton of random notes that I took like just during while I was watching the episode. So yeah, we're just gonna roll with it. Exactly, Toon. But thank you all so much for being here today. According to OBS, again, I never know how accurate OBS is, but according to OBS, I have 6 people watching right now, and that's awesome. So thank you all so much for being here. Ed is here as well. Thank you. Thanks for being here live with us today. We're here. Hello. Wow. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm tired, but I'm wired.
Tired but wired? I feel that.
Figure that one out. I mean, I was wired enough to actually shave my beard 10 minutes before the stream began.
Looking clean.
So I deemed you all worthy of seeing my clean shaven face. I'm not actually clean shaven. I've got like a 5 o'clock shadow thing going on because I didn't take out an actual razor. I just used an electric razor.
Yeah.
None of this is interesting. No one cares. Why am I talking about this? There you go. There
Cords
you
is
have
here
it.
as well. Hello, hello. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. Really appreciate it. Welcome, welcome. All right. So we are starting a little bit earlier today. I do have to have a hard cut off at 11:30. I've got some other stuff going on today, so that's
That
why we
is
are starting a bit earlier.
unacceptable.
I know, I know. Me having a social life, heaven forbid.
That's
Unfathomable.
unacceptable. I'm so mad.
Unfathomable.
I'm
A
so mad.
YouTuber having friends? What? No, I'm having lunch with a friend later, so we are gonna be wrapping up at 11:30. So let's go ahead and get right into it, shall we? Fiona and Cake. First of all, I love that these episodes are like all character names so far. I think that's super cool. Like we're getting
Yeah.
a Cake episode and a Prisma episode. Like that's super fun.
Are they really?
Um,
I mean, that was sort of like a thing they used to do back in the original series. Whenever they would have sometimes
yeah.
have, like major episodes that would just be like a character's name. You had like um obviously you had Simon and Marcy, you had Peebles and whatever the dick her brother's name is. Creepy weird dragon who likes to suck the nip. The
Oh,
tree nip.
Nettie.
Nettie, Peebles and Nettie or whatever. Um, there was you obviously had Finn the human, which was the bombshell one that
Right.
also introduced Prismo. And Jake the dog, which was the episode that followed up after that. It's like a convention they have for major episodes.
Yeah, I love
Um,
it. I wonder if they're going to
which
keep it going. Do we know actually how many episodes are in this miniseries? Because I don't actually remember off the
I
top
don't
of my
know,
head.
like 10 maybe.
10 maybe, because I feel like after this fourth episode that this feels like this was like the first act, you know? This felt like the setup
Yeah,
to kind of like now we're kind of getting the plot actually rolling, right? Like with the scarab running after them and everything.
the
Um
bloody Nancy Scarab with his stupid suit.
I love him. I
His
love his
cane.
design. I think it's so cool.
He's wonderful. And he's so rude. He goes to someone's tea shop and loves their tea and then kills them. Rude. All he wanted to do was make
I
tea.
know that guy was like
Come
basically
on.
Uncle Iroh, right? Like former kind of like war general or some kind of like
Left
prison
that life
guard or
behind
some
to
kind. And
make
he's like, oh, I'm
tea.
gonna leave that life behind and become a tea shop owner. And then this guy comes and recruits him. Or
Yeah.
he puts him in an egg or whatever, right? He like
Puts him in an egg.
pixelizes him.
You get a little Martin Mertens
Oh yeah,
cameo.
we got the Martin Mertens Easter egg. I don't know. Okay, so I don't know if that's gonna just be like a little Easter egg of like so we saw Scarab flipping through his files or whatever, right? And we find out that
And he's like flipping
he's
the bird.
yeah, he's flipping the double birds, which I love that. So in
Yeah.
character for him. But I'm curious because the Scarab is as Prismo described, like a god auditor, right? Like he's not actually like any kind of like deity of some kind, right? Like he's just sort of like
He's just like an
a
asshole.
guy
He's
for
he's not
hire.
even he's not even like a private investigator. He has the energy of like an insurance
Yes,
investigator.
exactly, exactly.
An insurance investigator for gods who enforces like petty rule violations.
Yep, yep,
He's not even like enforcing anything meaningful. They've got other guys for that.
yeah,
Um, I wonder if we'll get anything more from Martin. Martin is, to me, the biggest question mark in Adventure Time. Even now, that like there are so many bits and pieces of Martin. Martin is clearly one of those characters who hates talking about the past, so he
right.
avoids every chance he can get to talk about the past. Um, but then like I mean, do you remember in the first Distant Lands, the villain in that is like this weird black suit cladded character with a mask on who is voiced by Stephen Root, who voices
Mm.
Martin Mertens, and has an M on his face. And it's like, is
Yes,
that Martin? I don't
yeah.
know.
I
Like,
think it's
we know
heavily
that guy was
implied. Yeah,
that guy was kicking around in space for a long ass time.
yeah,
What the hell?
yeah. I think it's heavily implied that that was supposed to be Martin.
What the hell? Can we expect a Martin Mertens episode? I
We
don't
also
know. Like
saw a cameo of Minerva in this episode too, right? With
we did, or one of the Minerva
the
bots
bots at
anyway.
least, right? But we don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting, right? Like, are they gonna come into play at some point? Like,
God.
there's
It like
so many moving parts.
it's hard to tell if right now they are just um it's hard to tell right now if they're just wrapping up loose ends from the original series.
Yeah.
And we can sort of talk about that more because there are things that are revealed in these episodes that either wrap up loose ends intentionally or find a clever way to use unexplained phenomena from the original series to create the illusion of wrapping up loose ends or giving
Right.
resolution to certain things
Yes.
in
Yeah.
ways that really play into a theme, which I'll sort of talk about more. But Martin really interests me because we've got a couple of little Martin Easter eggs. Obviously, the first being the his appearance on that file where he's like doing the double bird. But also for like a split second in the intro credits, we can see Fiona wearing his jacket from the episode when he has crashed his ship and is pretending to have lost
Oh.
his arm. I don't know if you remember that. He's wearing what appears to be a an M65 field jacket with the like sergeant stripes or something on the arm. I think there's a sergeant stripes. They're some kind of rank.
Yeah.
And that is, which raises a lot of questions because, first of all, that's like in the context of the story, that is an old world item of clothing.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
that's like a Vietnam thing. But then on top of that, like, how does Fiona get it? Why is Fiona wearing it? What the hell? Question mark. Great big question mark. I don't know,
Right.
but I don't know if you picked up on that. I don't know how many people were paying attention to that, but yeah.
Interesting.
Martin, the
Interesting.
biggest question mark in Adventure Time.
Yeah. Do we remember? Was he in the finale? I don't remember. No, he like got.
He became a comet,
He
didn't he?
became the
Like he
comet, right? He followed the comet at the end. That's right. That's right. I forgot like how his story ended, but I guess he just like fucked off, huh? Which is on brand for him.
Which is on brand for him. He's a strange little man. He, I mean, fair enough. Like if an ancient deity came to me and was like, "Look, you can either kick around here for a while, or you could be reincarnated as a comet," I'd be like, you know what?
It's not a
Sign me
bad
up.
deal,
To be honest. Sign me up for the comet thing.
right?
That sounds fun. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. Do we even think that like do we think having answers to these questions about Martin would it all be satisfying, or do we think it would be better to just like leave him be? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I guess it would. It really depends. I feel like I trust the writers to make the right call there, right? Whether if they have an interesting story to tell, like they're gonna do it, right? But if not, I feel like Adventure Time has been really good about like leaving certain things to like just open ended, right? Like mystery. The
Yeah,
audience can kind of fill in the gaps. So, and that's like
yeah.
the nice thing about Adventure Time is like it's such a big world and there's so many characters and there's so much that's like left open that you can kind of fill in. And that's also kind of like
Mm.
the magic of like I always imagine like working on Adventure Time would have been such like a dream for like creative writers because like you have this huge open world and you have like all these characters that like don't have canon backstories or canon like whatever, right? Because like none of this was planned out, right? Like when they decided that like Marcy and Simon were gonna have a backstory together, like that wasn't planned out when they conceived the characters. They were just like, hey, these characters
Mm.
never interacted in an episode before. Let's come up with a reason for why that is. And then they just like came up with this beautiful, tragic backstory for the
It's
both of them.
it's very yes and dot dot dot
Yeah, absolutely. And
kind
I
of
love
writing.
that about the show. And I think
Um,
that's part of what makes it so fun.
it's funny that you should describe it as being magical, like using that word specifically, because Adventure Time to me is one of those shows. Let the noisy car go by. Adventure Time is one of those shows that is constantly captured in this like warring of instincts between being this absurdist spin on high fantasy and science fiction and having so much like literal magic in it in the context of the story, while also constantly debasing itself at every turn and subverting our expectations of everything and taking things which at first glance appear to be magical and then making them not magical at all, like sucking the magic out of them for I don't know, sometimes comic purposes, sometimes for thematic purposes. I mean, I think I mentioned this last week as well. Like I gave the example of Princess Bubblegum being, at first glance, something of a spin on Princess Peach. But
Hmm.
then the more you know her, the more you find out she's just like a weird, mad scientist and a benevolent dictator,
Right.
basically, which is as much of a 180 as you can do on that. And they do that constantly, like all the time. You remember the episode when Ice King tries to bring Fiona and Cake to life for the first time,
I don't
and
remember
he
that,
finds
but
the
yeah.
life-giving Magi and like gives him his book with all the stories in it, and he just brings the book.
Oh no, Tom froze. Did he freeze for all of you? Rip. Um, oh yeah, we definitely need to talk about that magical, about how Prismo is the one uh who actually came up with Fiona and Cake. That's definitely one of the things that I want to talk about.
Mm.
Oh,
So
there you are, Tom. You froze for a bit.
I froze for a bit. What was the last thing you heard me say?
I heard you say the Ice King took the books and wished Fiona and Cake to life.
Oh yeah, and it really like subverts the magic of that
Right.
by just turning it into a joke, and he brings the book to life rather than the stories to life.
Right.
And it's this weird little guy. um yeah, so I mean, where have we left off? What happened last time leading into these two episodes?
Hmm.
Um do you want to cover that, or do you want me to cover that?
Uh, you want to take a crack? Go ahead.
I'll take a crack. Okay. So we had like a double cliffhanger, kind of, where we were introduced to Fiona Campbell. That's the first time I think she's ever had a surname as well.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Introduced to Fiona Campbell and her like nightmarish post-industrial dirge of a lifestyle.
Right.
Um, no friends. She's been broken up with by a hot guy who's a DJ. Can't hold a job down for longer than 3 weeks. No one likes her. Not even she likes her.
Yeah.
Um, the only person in the world she seems to hold in any high regard is Gary, uh, aka Prince Gumball.
Gary is like
Um,
the best friend Fiona has right now.
Yeah,
Like,
Marshall Lee's a little bit of a shit stirrer. He's kind of just an asshole. He's fun, but he doesn't strike me as a particularly good friend.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Gary was
He's
like,
just
"Let me make you coffee. Let's go look for cake." He's like actually a good friend.
yeah, Marshall Lee is just the landlord's son or landlady's son.
Right, exactly.
Um, and and the only other creature other than Gary that she holds in any regard is her own cat, who starts behaving very weirdly in a way the audience can immediately recognize as being what I could loosely describe as Ice King coded. Uh, like going crazy for ice all the time, not liking tuna or what, I don't remember.
Mm.
Um, and then Cake goes haywire, disappears through a portal, uh, which gives us our first cliffhanger leading into the next episode, where we get to see Simon in a very similar situation of hating every ounce of his own existence, being the only non-magical person in a magical world and feeling generally kind of lonely and alienated, really just being a couple of bad days away from committing a mass shooting or something. Like, he does not seem okay. He really, he's not okay. He's doing some pretty effed up things to poor Choose Goose. Like, I know Choose Goose is evil now, but you know, especially in this in episode 3, you really feel sorry for that little
Right, he's already been
weirdo.
fried like once, and now he's like being brought
He's
back
like,
to get fried again.
he like, what is it? He says all you are is a glorified magical battery or something.
Right,
It's cruel. It's
right.
really cruel in a way that you don't expect from Simon, who otherwise in other like flashbacks and stuff, Simon Petrikov always came across as like compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
in a kind of compassion that he seems to have lost
Mm-hmm.
in search for the thing he loves, this like idol he's built in his mind of Betty.
Mm-hmm.
But then that episode ends on another cliffhanger with Cake, who disappeared in episode 1, popping out of his head,
Yeah.
literally, which leads us neatly into the episode. Is it just called Cake the Cat?
It's just called Cake the Cat. Yeah.
Just called Cake the Cat. So let's take it away.
All right. Yeah. So I have like a bunch of notes, and we can just go through them, and we can kind of stop and talk about more of whatever sounds interesting.
Let's do it.
So we start off the episode with Prismo actually, and he's like watching this memory of Finn. Okay, it's interesting because like we don't actually know what he's watching, right? Because he's watching Finn and Jake, and Finn, interestingly, I've seen quite a few people point this out, that Finn actually has the tattoo of Jake in this memory or whatever, even though Jake is in the memory. So it's like there's a couple of questions here, right? Like, one, did Finn get the tattoo before Jake died, or like what's the deal with that? Two, is this a real memory, or is this something that Prismo is just like gone to an alternate universe and is like watching? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of questions I have about that. Or is it just a mistake, right? Did they not meant to give Finn the tattoo before Jake died or something? I don't know. But I thought that was a weird detail. But
I was like under the impression Jake was dead in Obsidian.
Right, yeah.
Like the tattoo implied Jake was dead.
Right.
But it's hard to say. It's
hard to say. Yeah. But
there's lots of retconning going on.
But this
both
kind of
deliberate and otherwise.
Yeah, but this kind of leads me into kind of my first like bucket of something that I wanted to talk about today, and that's this idea of like loss and depression.
Is this loss?
Is this loss? Of loss and depression, and escapism being the coping mechanism to grief, right? And we see this with Fiona, right? She's kind of like grieving her life essentially, right? And she's kind of like frustrated and depressed in her life, and she uses escapism in her dreams, right, to like cope with her mundanity. And like Simon, is very depressed and apathetic, and he uses like escapism into the past, right, as his method to cope with his depression. And then now we're seeing Prismo in this episode, and he's like also very apathetic, right? Like his like little warning alarm is going off because Cake's,
he does not
give a single solitary fuck whatsoever. Like he's completely ignoring it. And even when like Wyatt is there, right? There's that whole bit where Wyatt is there for a wish and Prismo just like does not care and like sends him into this silent film world and all this stuff, right? And so it's very clear that Prismo himself is apathetic, and it's only until the last second, right, when he's like just about to get in trouble, that he like finally gives a shit about like what's going on. Which so it's interesting to me that like we're seeing all of these characters, right? And it's clear also that Prismo to an extent is grieving the loss of Jake, and like, sad that he's like lonely and all this stuff. So
there's some coding there, right, with Prismo.
Oh yeah, Prismo is queer as fuck, let's be real.
Like Prismo, I think I'm not even saying this as a joke. Like I think Prismo was clearly like genuinely in love with Jake. It's like Jake was the only character Prismo ever had like a meaningful connection with. And Prismo's deep mourning really is only comparable to one other character, and that's Simon mourning the love of his life that is Betty. Like there's something going on there that's greater than platonic, I think. Right. Yeah. There's something implied there. Yeah. They're both drinking their days away.
Yeah. Also, that is actually really neat too, and I didn't know that the entire silent film sequence was directed by or animated by Nick Cross, who directed Over the Garden Wall. That's a very
that tracks, doesn't it?
Neat little fun fact. Yeah, that really tracks. That's awesome.
That tracks. That vintage style.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this overarching motif of apathy and escapism, which I think is interesting, and I'm curious to see how much more we're going to see that from other characters in the film, or the miniseries rather. And, also like, I'm curious to know, is Prismo, like what happened to him at the end of this fourth episode? Like he kind of exploded, right? Like he doesn't die. He doesn't die.
Prismo can't die.
Yeah.
Prismo can't die unless you kill
the old, you wake up the old man, right?
You wake up or kill the old man.
Yeah.
It's implied, I think, that killing the old man is not itself enough. You need to wake him up first, I guess, because when the Lich kills him, he wakes him up first. Or maybe the Lich just wanted him to be awake for when he killed him. I don't know. The Lich is purposefully cruel. Yeah. I hope we get to see a bit of the Lich in this as well.
Actually, we actually saw a bit of the Lich in this episode. I don't know if you caught it, but in the silent film bit, there's like a Lich in the background of one of the shots, and it's really easy to miss. I don't know if if you caught that.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. I want Ron Perlman back. I want lines spoken.
I'd be surprised
Um,
if he didn't come back in some way, shape, or
it would
form.
be really cool. I love Ron
Yeah.
Perlman. Everybody loves Ron. He's great. He's
He's
Ron
great.
Perlman.
Yeah.
What's not to love? He's
Yeah.
great. War never changes. Adventure Time never changes. Yeah, and Wyatt, an unexpected return from fucking Wyatt.
Yeah, isn't he
of
like
all
covered
people.
in blood or something at the
Like,
beginning? Like, what is
definitely,
happening?
Wyatt definitely had just come from shooting up a brothel because he is covered in blood. And he's like, do you know what I had to do to get here? That's
Oh
my
my
Wyatt.
God.
I don't remember what Wyatt sounds like.
It's too funny.
Um,
It's too funny.
He's, oh God, Wyatt is the most like pathetic man. He makes me feel good about myself, to be honest.
And that's saying something.
That's really saying something. Like, it doesn't matter how bad things get, at least I'm not Wyatt. You know,
Oh
I
my
kept
God.
joking last week that like Simon was going full taxi driver, and you know, he's getting closer.
But
He's
Wyatt's
getting
already there.
closer. You know, Wyatt's already there. Wyatt already went and shot up that brothel. To get a chance to. Who knew that's all you needed to do to get into Prismo's wish room is shoot up a brothel.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
Oh my God, it's too funny.
And you really get the impression that I mean, Prismo kind of likes to fuck with people, doesn't he? Like you know, he doesn't have to make his wishes so monkey's paw. Like that's evident from his interactions with Jake. Like he
Mhm.
can choose to make his wishes straightforward. He just
And
opts not to
oftentimes,
do
like
that.
in the main series, like he actually kind of goes out of his way to like avoid the monkey's paw situation, right? Like when Jake tries to wish for a sandwich, he's like, "Dude, I'll just make you a sandwich," right? Like he actually kind
Make a
of
sandwich,
goes out
yeah.
of his way to make sure that people are kind of getting the most out of their wishes, right? And like,
Or he
there's that
goes out of his way to make sure Jake is getting the most
at
out
least
of it.
Jake, right? And like,
He does
you know,
not, the same cannot be said for Wyatt, who he seems to purposefully fuck with. Because
right,
to be
right.
honest,
And there's
Wyatt probably deserves it. Let's
yeah,
be
and like
real.
that even with the episode with the Lich, right? When he kind of like gave Jake the hint of like what to wish for to like make
Yeah,
it so
like
that it
literally
worked out.
saying the words for him.
Yeah, exactly.
God, yeah. I mean, it's hard. You can't blame him. It's hard not to love Jake.
Yeah.
Jake kind of mostly brings out the best in people,
Right.
except that one squirrel. Yeah, but I I don't want to jump ahead. I feel like we're jumping ahead to Prismo before really talking about
Yeah,
Cake the
yeah.
cat.
But actually speaking of squirrels, that actually kind of brings me into another point I had
The
here.
squirrel from the
The
tree
squirrel
episode.
from the first episode, like the episode 3, right? Like the again, kind of going along this motif of kind of like depression and stuff like that. There's like this little moment that like we get with the squirrel that I feel like is kind of played off for a joke because we see like Cake in the background, you know, like eating all these fruits and like going silly and all that stuff. But there's this moment we get with the squirrel where he's like, "Yeah, I have this solitude and I like it, but also I don't like it because it's lonely." And then
'Cause
Cake
it's
just like
lonely, yeah.
is not listening whatsoever and just like fucks off, right? And then
Cake is behaving exactly like a cat would behave.
100%.
Like just knocking shit over and eating stuff and
But
ruining people's
I just
life.
thought it was interesting how like even in this minor character of the squirrel, we're kind of getting this theme of like loss and depression and loneliness.
Does anyone know who voices the squirrel?
I don't know.
Toon, look it up. Tell us in chat. I'm lazy.
Yes. Anyone in chat want to let us know who?
I'm lazy. Somebody tell me who voices
Squirrel.
that squirrel. Because I remember, yeah, I think does Jim Cummings voice the owl?
Yes, the owl. The owl was familiar because I was like, he's in Amphibia, I think, right?
No, the thing is that the voice that Jim Cummings does for the owl sounds a lot like Stephen Root, and Stephen Root
Oh,
voices
yeah, that's right.
the mayor in
In
Amphibia.
That's right. Okay, the
But
voice
I
is just
think
similar.
either it is Stephen Root and I'm just like doing 7 degrees of separation, but I do think the owl is voiced by Jim Cummings. I'm just gonna have to look it up. I'm gonna have to stop being so damn lazy. What is that episode called? Adventure Time.
Cake the cat.
It's the one, but it's the one with the tree. It's the one with the tree, in the tree, part of the tree.
Oh, that's an Adventure Time episode, isn't it?
Up a tree, yeah. That's the episode that these characters are from.
I totally forgot that. I was like totally fine with that being like an unexplained backstory of the squirrel.
Like that's why that apple makes
got
cake
it. Okay,
that's remember, because that's what they do.
I don't remember, but got it. Okay.
You are a fake fan, is what we're learning today.
I'm sorry that I don't have
Plain and simple.
all
Okay, I
10
was right.
seasons of Adventure Time encyclopedically memorized.
I was right. Jim Cummings does voice the owl, and the squirrel is voiced by a fellow called Mark Maron,
Mm,
who, let's have a look, I guess is a stand-up comedian
that makes sense.
who also is in Almost Famous and who also is in The Bad Guys and plays the snake in The Bad Guys.
I see. I see.
So there you
Uh,
go.
cool. All right. Jim Cummings is one of Toon's favorite VAs. That's cool.
He's iconic. Jim Cummings is friggin' Winnie the Pooh.
Oh
Like,
yeah, he is. That's awesome.
what's not to love? Um, I wasn't expecting. I don't know about you. I wasn't expecting Cake to have like a mini arc in this episode. I
Dude,
wasn't
yeah, no,
expecting there to be
actually
that
that's
much of Cake.
absolutely what something I want to talk about. Okay, so Cake does have kind of an arc in this episode, right? So first she like shows up in Ooh and she's like totally confused and afraid of everything, right? Like she sees that person who looks like Fiona from the back, and like when she approaches her, it's like a weird grape lady or something, and she gets like freaked out, right? And like, you know, when
We've all been there.
we've all been there. And when she gets to Ooh, she's like all freaking out and she's all unsure of stuff. And then like she ends up getting this confidence, right? And she's like, oh, actually, like I know what I'm doing. Like this is awesome. I don't need Fiona.
Then she gets too much confidence.
And then she
goes
gets too
overboard.
much confidence, and she just like is in classic cat fashion, right? Is like knocking
Just
shit
wrecking
over,
everything.
tearing stuff up, and like, you know, scratching people, right? Like making people bleed without a care in the world, like classic cat stuff. Getting into trouble and all that stuff. And then what I found interesting at the end of this episode is that Cake nor Fiona really ends up kind of learning any sort of lesson here, because Fiona shows up at the end and beats up all the villagers.
They just start wailing on everybody.
And the way that scene is choreographed is so both funny to me and so like upsetting at the same time, because like if you go back and watch any other like fight sequence in Adventure Time, right, it's all super cartoony, you know, you get like the fun sound effects or like, you know, the like flashing or whatever, right, or like people flying around, right, like it's a cartoon fight, right? But like this fight, there was a weird like juxtaposition between like the cartoony nature of it, because like all the characters that Fiona is fighting are like a blueberry or like a stick with a face on it, right? Like it's all very silly and cartoony, but like she hits them and they just get like bonked and fall over, right? Like it's like almost gritty in a weird way, right? Like there's like a
scrappy.
There's like a groundedness to it that like feels very not classic Adventure Time to me, which obviously there's like a lot of that in this episode too, right? Like that moment as well when the squirrel like throws the strawberry to Cake, and we think for a moment like, oh, it's gonna be this heroic, awesome, epic moment where friendship prevails, right? But then no, the strawberry just like gets thrown too far and splats over, and Cake gets into trouble, right? So there's like these moments of like realism, I want to say, right, even though that's not quite the right word.
It's playing back into that theme of demystifying or like removing the magic from the magic.
Yeah
kind of like that feels like a running theme of this.
Yes, and we actually get another we get a similar moment to that in the fourth episode too, right, with Prismo when he puts Fiona back in her original outfit and she's like, I can't run in this skirt, right? And then
I'm a big fan of the shorts.
Yeah,
gotta say,
it's a good look.
Shorts are a good look.
So Prismo gives her the shorts, but like that's again playing with that idea, right, of like, oh, Fiona and Cake is a story. You don't have to worry about skirts when you're coming up with a fictional story, but now it's real, it's quote unquote real, right? And so you can't be running around in a skirt in the same way, which I really like. Yeah, again, it's that idea of like demystifying, taking the magic out of the world, right? And
yeah,
it's interesting. I like the way they're playing with that.
It's weird, isn't it? Because last week I said that Fiona is kind of the audience surrogate, but now really it feels like Prismo is the audience surrogate.
Right, yeah.
Like, Prismo is the one watching all of these things as what appear to him to be like a TV show. You know? And there is a major kind of reveal in that fourth episode that we can sort of get to in due course. I feel like I have so much less to say about episode 3 than episode 4.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel like episode 3 is fairly cut and dry because Cake is a much less complicated character because Cake is a cat. You know, like with characters like Fiona, there's so much to unpack in terms of what Fiona's boots on the ground lived experience of life is.
Yeah.
And with Simon as well. But there are some, I feel like, in many ways, I feel like there's more going on with Simon in the Cake the Cat episode than there is with Cake
For
herself.
sure.
You know, it's really interesting to see how tragically single-minded Simon is in this pursuit of this nebulous goal. Like, I don't even think Simon knows what he's doing. He's trying to breach some interdimensional level to get to Golb, I guess. And like, I guess Betty is Golb now. I don't know. Or Betty has been assimilated into Golb, question mark. But it's like things that in any other world would make Simon drop everything. So like Cake the Cat coming out of his head and then Fiona coming out of his head mean nothing to him. He's just like, Fiona disappears and Simon just immediately closes the shutters and just carries on, you know, which is sad and fucked up. And Simon is turning out to be, I mean, it's tough to say. Like at this point with Simon, I'm fully prepared for Simon to go full villain. It could go either way with Simon right now, but I don't know. I don't know what you think about it.
I actually, you know, Simon, and again, we're kind of jumping to the end here, but Simon is something I want to talk about. So I will admit I have been watching some YouTube videos in between, just because again there's so much Adventure Time, and I'm trying to I don't necessarily like want to rewatch the show. Maybe I will probably rewatch parts of the show, but I've been watching some YouTube videos that kind of like, you know, recap some of the episodes and some of the stories and stuff like that, just so I can kind of like refresh my memory. Yeah, and I was watching this one video on the Ice King, and I was really enjoying it up until a certain point, and then it really got me thinking and questioning, because in this video, and I wish I could remember the person who made the video so I could let you all know so you can watch the video. Maybe I'll link it in Discord later. But in this video, this guy was talking about how he really didn't actually like the finale of Adventure Time, Come Along With Me, because and something that I was, you know, kind of refreshing my memory on as I was watching this episode is that as we are kind of approaching that finale, you know, Ice King is and this person was also talking about Ice King as a character being sort of a metaphor for disability, for mental illness, for, you know, like they were kind of extrapolating some of their own experiences with family having dementia. And
yeah,
you know,
the dementia coding is real.
Right, exactly. And so I totally respect that reading, right? Like that's a totally valid reading to have.
I think it's particularly with the episode I Remember You, where those notes feel pretty unambiguously coded to sound like they are the last lucid thoughts of someone who knows that pretty soon they're going to lose themselves to something akin to dementia or Alzheimer's or any one of those like neurodegenerative
exactly. And so, you know, throughout the kind of last arcs of the show, a lot of the characters, including Finn and Jake, start to not change the Ice King, but they start to change their own attitudes towards the Ice King, right? And they start to treat him differently. They start calling him Simon. They start like treating him more kindly, right? Having more patience with him, trying to teach him, right? Like, no, actually kidnapping princesses is wrong, right? Like they're actually like treating him more kindly and more compassionately than they did at the beginning of the show, right? Where they really just made fun of him and treated him as a villain. And so like, and then we actually get Betty at the end of the show, right? Who literally goes mad trying to bring Simon back and is kind of like treating Ice King like a villain almost, right? Like she like doesn't give any kind of sympathy or compassion towards Ice King and essentially treats Ice King as an obstacle towards her goal of getting Simon back, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, you could read that as like Betty being a villain, right? She's like treating Ice King like horribly. Kind of.
I feel like it's probably a little more nuanced.
It's definitely more nuanced than that. But I think to a certain extent, we're supposed to question her motivations and question her goal, right?
all of that really began with the episode I Remember You, didn't it? Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of where it began. I feel like I'd have to believe that was a Rebecca Sugar thing.
Right.
Like all of that stuff really
Yeah.
began with Rebecca Sugar.
And so
And it
now
reminds me a lot of Rebecca Sugar's comic Don't Cry for
totally.
Me, I'm Already Dead. It
Totally.
has that thing of you know, you can create the illusion of this person still being there, but the sad reality is that they're not.
Yeah.
And one way or another, you kind of have to make peace with that.
Yeah. So I
Um,
guess a lot of the fan reaction, and I was not really involved with fan discussion while the finale was going on, so I wasn't part of this discussion, but apparently there was a lot of discussion going on about like whether Ice King would get reverted back to Simon in the finale, whether that was like a satisfying story resolution for him. And I can honestly see both sides of the argument, right? Like with, oh, maybe Ice King as a representation of disability should have stayed as Ice King because that could have been, you know, its own
it's
story to tell. And like I can understand that argument. But now what's interesting to me is now in Fionna and Cake in episode 4, at the end of episode 4, we have Simon declaring, right, that he thinks the solution to all of this, right, in order to protect everyone from the scarab, in order to
is to
return
become
magic to
Ice
Fionna
King
and
again.
Cake's
Yeah.
world, is to become Ice King again, right? And I feel like the writers are taking this in a direction where Simon is going to believe that going back to Ice King might be the solution, but I have a feeling that that's not going to be what the end solution is going to be,
Yeah,
right?
I don't feel like Simon knows what he's talking about right now.
Right,
I feel like
exactly.
that guy needs to have a nap and he needs to go to a couple of AA meetings.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know, he needs to watch Taxi Driver so he could know the path he's headed down. Yeah, it's tricky though, isn't it? Because like Simon's trajectory reminds me a lot of a real story that I'm familiar with because of a Robin Williams film called Awakenings. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't, no.
Awakenings. That's a real story, and it's a sad story in reality, but it's about a man who, when he was very, very, very young, when he was like 12, um, developed a degenerative disease that basically reduced him to a vegetative state,
Mm.
which he and several other people would remain in. Like it's a very rare disease, but like he would remain in that state for basically the better part of like 50 years.
Yeah.
And then a scientist, a physician of some kind, basically was able to synthesize a treatment which actually helped this man to recover from that state
Mm-hmm.
fully, but only for a short time. And unfortunately, I think something like they ran out of funding. There is the pervasive belief that if the funding had kept coming and if they were given more time to figure it out, they actually could have created a treatment that would have presented a more permanent solution
Mm-hmm.
for this man, which unfortunately they never got because no money to be made in it, I guess. But he was able to functionally cure, quote unquote, a man from being in a vegetative state,
Mm.
which is not in like the stories like this exist and they're real and it's not
Right.
impossible, you know.
Right.
And that's kind of what Simon reminded me of at the end there, sort of that
Mm.
miraculous recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think Simon and his relationship with other people and his relationship with the Ice King is just a bit too complicated to just call it one thing and then be
Yeah.
mad when it doesn't follow through on that one thing.
Right.
You know, there are definitely elements of like dementia coding or Alzheimer's coding there. But I
Right.
feel like there's other things to it as well. But
Yeah, and I feel like
yeah,
I'm really intrigued by the direction that we're going in Fiona and Cake. Like I totally see the argument of like Simon shouldn't have been turned back at the end of Come Along With Me, but this idea of Simon like wanting to turn back into the Ice King in Fiona and Cake and how this is kind of like him running away from his problems, right? Like, these first 4 episodes, we see him desperately trying to bring Betty back, right? I feel like this is like almost Simon going through the stages of grief, right? Like he's like almost bargaining, trying to bring Betty back.
He's like he's been stuck in one stage of grief for a really long time.
Right. And like, and obviously like the stages of grief, right, are not linear either, right? It's not like you go from one to the next and eventually get to the end, right? Like you can bounce back between the stages and go back and forth. It can cycle between them, right? Like it's not a straightforward thing, grief and loss and all that stuff, right? And so I feel like Simon is definitely stuck in between, like, bargaining and depression and anger, right? Like he's kind of showing all of these signs, and like now at the end of this episode, it's almost a different kind of bargain, right? Where he's like, well, if I can go back to Ice King, right? Like I don't have to feel the pain of this loss anymore. And also like, bonus, Fionna and Cake get their magic back. But I have a feeling it's also not quite going to work that way. Here's another thing I wanted to talk about. And I briefly brought this up, but I want to go a little bit more deep into this. Fionna and Cake were made up by Prismo and inserted into Ice King's mind.
Yeah. But now we're getting to it.
But interestingly, so Fionna, though, I feel like is still connected to Simon, right? Which we can see from the first episode because their lives mirror each other in that episode.
Well, yeah, she still exists in his head.
Right.
And it's important to remember that just because he's being used functionally as a hard drive doesn't mean that he hasn't done his own editorial, if you will, on those stories. We can see that he has done, like the first Fionna and Cake episode ends with them going like, who's really great? Ice King. Yeah. That guy's dope. I would go down on the Ice King. They don't say that. Why did I say that? Why did I say that? Why do you let me do this? Yeah, so he is like, there is always going to be an element of him in there. And they have clearly had an imprint on his life as well.
Yeah.
But like, what I find interesting is the way that reveal brings back a particular, like what seems like a completely innocuous bit from the original series, which is the idea that these stories are projected to him in his dreams. Like they ask him in the episode Fionna and Cake and Fionna, I think the episode is called, where they meet the real life Fionna and she's like telling the Ice King how the stories actually went down. And it raises this big question, like, where does she get these tapes from? Like, where does she has these videotapes of Fionna and Cake adventures. Where is she getting them from? This is really bizarre. Like if supposedly these characters were just invented by the Ice King, that's really bizarre. And of course it's revealed in the end she's not actually really Fionna, she's just like a fan. But that doesn't answer the question of where'd she get the tapes. So they ask the Ice King, like, where do you get your ideas from? And he's just like, they're projected into my mind in the middle of the night by a beam of red light, like everybody else.
Right.
And it comes across as like a throwaway joke.
Right.
But then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that it's 100% true. That's exactly what happens. And it's never qualified.
It's never explained. And now we finally get the answer.
And now we finally get the answer, yeah. And it's hard to tell if they were ever actually planning on explaining that, if this was their plan all along, or if that was just like a thing they did as a joke that they were never going to qualify. Because that's very in Adventure Time spirit.
Right.
To just have these weird, innocuous things that they never, ever explain. But, doesn't matter. They found a way to do it cleanly, but it does kind of take the magic out of it a bit, doesn't it? Purposefully so. Like, that's not a criticism.
Exactly. Again, it's that demystifying thing, right?
Like, if you're just watching that episode in isolation, that Fionna and Cake and Fionna episode, it's like, oh, wow, there's like a magic to the idea that these stories come to him in the night in this beam of magical light. And then it's like, no, it's just Prismo using him like a hard drive.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But then like we get into all these questions, right? Of like, because like we get that moment of Prismo explaining the multiverse to Fiona and Cake and showing them like, hey, you guys are like not connected at all, right? You guys are way
You're
over
like
here
way over here
because I had to, you know, make you up unauthorized, so I couldn't have you anywhere nearby. And then like there's that moment where it's like, oh, it's kind of lonely. Oh, but you guys are like free agents, and they think it's kind of cool. But Prismo is kind of like hesitant about thinking it's cool, right? And so like, and then they have the moment later too where Fiona and Cake are running down the hall trying to escape Prismo's, you know, time room or whatever. And, you know, Fiona asks Cake, like, you know, how do you feel about the fact that we like don't exist, right? Or like we're not supposed to exist, right? We're unauthorized, we're like made off the books, and like we are in a way they're not real because they were made up by Prismo, right? They're not real in the same way that like the Wish alternate universes are quote unquote real, which I mean in a way you could argue they are real in that way, but I think that's kind of the question they're playing with, right? Like, are they real? Are they not real? What does real even mean in this context, right? And like Cake ends up responding to Fiona, you know, she gets all wiggly and she's like, you know, it doesn't matter what we were supposed to be. We are who we are now and we do what we want, right? And that's kind of like the answer that she has. But I feel like this question of like this existential question of like, you know, what are we supposed to be if we weren't supposed to be anything, right? Is this question that the show I think is going to play with as we go forward. And what exactly the answer to that is going to be, I feel like it's going to be along the lines of like, you know, you determine your own path, you know, you make up your own stories, and I feel like that would be a pretty interesting way for that story to go. But yeah, I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts about kind of the existential questions that the show is kind of talking about.
Everyone get out your bingo cards. I'm about to talk about Blade Runner.
Bring them out, folks.
I also want to respond to Toon though, saying that the Fiona and Cake fan in that episode says that it was an old TV show. She does and doesn't say that. She says she thinks that it's, I'm pretty sure she says like she thinks it was an old TV show, or like assumed it was an old TV show. That doesn't mean that was like the answer as to what it was. Like we still come out of that episode with a lot of ambiguity as to where those tapes came from. You know, and how they happened. But yeah, I mean, God, what does it remind me of beyond just Blade Runner? Because everything reminds me of Blade Runner. Whenever we get into that, like that thing of like, what does it mean to be real and what constitutes being a real person?
Right.
I always default to Blade Runner.
Right, of course.
And that obviously immediately ties into those post-industrial themes of feeling like alienated in a social structure that entirely prizes you on your capacity to be helpful to a capitalist system,
which is like Fiona's life, right?
Fiona's life, and outside of that you don't exist, you know. And all of those little things that make you who you are, all of your adventures and all of your personal life choices amount to nothing in the end. And all those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Like tears in rain. There it is.
Kind of reminds me of, there's a Superman story written by Alan Moore, and I want to say it's called For the Man Who Has Everything. I think that's what it's called. I know there is an Alan Moore Superman story called that, but there is an Alan Moore Superman story, maybe that one, can't remember, where like Superman is trapped in a false reality, similar to Pahoy, where whether or not Pahoy was real or fake, I don't think we'll ever know. That's ambiguous. But like Superman is explicitly trapped in this false reality, but he has a son and a wife and a life and a position in society, and he has all of these things going for him, and like none of it's real. And I think he has a scene in that where he has to talk to his son and explain to him that he doesn't exist, and it's like the saddest thing. I might be misremembering that, but it reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they do exist and they don't exist. But the fact is that now, whether they like it or not, they have made an indelible impact on the world around them that sort of confirms their existence.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And Prismo is the Wishmaster, and even if it's sort of with terms and conditions apply, they exist right now. And I see no reason why Fiona and Cake can't make a wish. Is that not valid?
Right. True. Good point. Good point.
Do we not think that will come into the fold at any point? I don't
That's a
know.
really good point. I didn't even think about that.
Um, yeah, and as well, she is right. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is literally one of the best comics ever written. Alan Moore is just a genius. Alan Moore is just the best. He's
Yeah.
just the best. Yeah, for The Man Who Has Everything. Everybody go read that. That's really good. They also did, I think, the Justice League cartoon did an adaptation of that, which is the only screen adaptation of an Alan Moore comic that Alan Moore actually likes.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will. Everybody go watch that. Go read Alan Moore. He's really good.
He's really good.
All right, that's my shameless Alan Moore plug.
All right. Well, I think I covered all the kind of thematic and character stuff I wanted to talk about. I do have some plotty theory cooking that I've got going up. If we want to,
let's hear it.
If we want to get into it. First of all, I just want to say I was totally right about the collar going on Cake, but we all saw that
was
coming.
Pretty clear.
We all saw that coming. We all saw that happening. I also love the little moment of with the squirrel like going with the voices, and like we finally get to Cake's voice. It's like, oh yeah, that's the right one. It's like, hey, your voice, your choice. That was a cute moment. Yeah, so we got that. I have a note here that was all like, that moment where Fiona's looking for Cake and Marshall and LSP are in the park and they're like passing a bottle between them. I was like, we all know that bottle was originally drawn as a joint. Let's be real.
Can I just quickly respond to Magical real quick?
Yeah.
However, if Fiona and Cake can get a wish granted, wouldn't it be monkey pawed as well? We talked about this earlier. I don't know if you were on the stream for that. The monkey paw thing, I believe to be 100% deliberate on Prismo's part. Like, he does it when he wants to.
Yeah.
And it's demonstrated with Jake that he does not have to do it when he doesn't want to.
Right. I feel like Prismo would have a soft spot for Fiona and Cake.
We have no reason to believe that Prismo wants to monkey paw Fiona and Cake. Like, I don't believe that's something
he helps them at the end, right?
He chooses to help them at the end. Yeah, he's like they're their own. He comes around. He's like, no, they're their own person. Let them go.
Yeah, they go with their want, right? Yeah, I love that.
They're having their own Officer K arc. Yeah, kind of. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
Yeah. There's a moment in Cake's song, which I think is going to play a significant part in the story later, where as Cake is going around, obliviously fucking things up for the entire village, there's a moment where she's like playing with one of the hot dog guards and it turns into a normal hot dog.
Yeah, with Prismo's magic.
Yeah, with Prismo's magic there. So what was that? What's going on there? That was gone totally unexplained. So we have no idea what's going on there. But I have a feeling it's going to be significant. Yeah, that was very mysterious and interesting.
I guess we'll see.
I guess we will see.
I guess we'll see.
We shall see. Oh, also Cake just straight up did a murder. Like, she killed that pillow kid. Like, that pillow kid is dead.
There's a lot of murder that goes on. Choose Goose is dead.
Choose Goose is dead.
Choose Goose is dead. Whoever the prostitutes were in the brothel that Wyatt
they're all dead.
And shut up. They're all
dead.
Wyatt isn't dead, but he has been relegated to a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, he fully deserved.
Yeah. I also just want to give a shout out to Astrid, the Fiona and Cake fan kid. I just think she's really neat and cute and funny. When the moment at the end when she was like, "Oh, my hat," that was just really funny, really cute.
The hat that doesn't quite fit Fiona.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Let's go back through my notes. There was a couple cute little Easter eggs in the Prismo sequence when Prismo's like flipping through the channels. We get a cute little moment with Susan and Frida, right, from the end of Distant Lands. Susan, they're just like hanging out and like living their best life, and I was just really happy to see them. I don't think they're gonna come back in any significant way, but it was just nice to see them.
Always be happy to see more Susan, because Susan is outrageously hot, and I don't care who knows that.
It's true.
Susan gave teenage Tom many feelings, many thoughts. Many thoughts and feelings, I'll say, about
there was
big
also
muscular women with big titties.
Oh yeah, big broad shoulders and
big titties, big muscles.
Yep. All right. And then we also got a cute little Flapjack cameo in that moment too, which
Yeah,
is fun.
I screen capped that and sent it to Toon immediately, like,
This universe already existed, right? I thought that was
what
cute.
the hell?
That was cute. That was really fun.
I guess canonically now Flapjack does come first.
Yeah, I guess so. Do you think Flapjack is like a reincarnation of Finn?
That's what Toon said to me. I like to think so. I've never actually seen the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, so I don't know what their personality types are. But
it's cute.
Question mark. I don't know.
It could be. It could be.
I like to think so.
Yeah, that was a fun moment. Oh, I have a note here that Simon, he spends the whole first episode, right, like trying to ignore Cake and trying to get rid of her and trying to like get him out of his mind or whatever. But the thing with Simon is that he's got Cake whether he likes it or not.
He does, doesn't he? Confirm Simon got a dumpy.
He's double cheeked up on a Sunday. What can we say?
He's got the second biggest dumpy in the show thus far.
Oh my gosh. They had to give us the butt shot twice in that episode, which was great.
But he's only the second biggest dumpy because, of course, Fiona gets the
top billing, right? Of course, yeah. I just
know what they were doing.
In my notes, I just have Simon's got Cake whether he likes it or not, and then I have that emoji that's just like the pensive emoji, just like it's a shame, really. He's got Cake.
Like
Shia knows what I'm talking about.
Ingwe looking away from the sinking Titanic. It's a similar kind of face to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking at Simon's Cake and then just like
that cake.
Forget it, Cake. It's Chinatown.
No. Oh my god. Oh, okay. One more plot thing that I want, or two more plot things that I wanted to talk about actually. So first of all, we get another mention, and this is a mystery that was left open-ended in the original show, but we got another mention of Prismo's boss, quote unquote, right? We find out that the Scarab is not Prismo's boss, right? He's just an auditor.
The Scarab is just a friggin' insurance investigator.
Exactly.
A dickhole.
And so we don't know who Prismo's boss is.
Do we have any guesses?
In the chat? I don't think it's going to be like Golb or anything like that. I feel like that doesn't make any sense.
Is Prismo's boss just Benson?
Is Prismo's boss just like Adam Muto? Like,
is Prismo's boss just Gustavo Fring? Is this going to be the big Gustavo Fring reveal?
Is Prismo's boss Bob Hoskins?
Is Bob Hoskins behind it all? I mean, Bob Hoskins is dead, so that would be pretty difficult, to be fair, unless he faked his own death.
Toon says that he likes how they approach swears. I totally agree. Like when Prismo said, like, let's give Fiona a badass sword, I didn't even like register that he said like badass. It just
somebody says shit at some point.
Felt so natural, yeah.
I hope they drop at least one F-bomb.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
If we do get Prismo's boss revealed, I want him to be just like no one special. I want it to be like a very literal interpretation of a boss.
Just some like bloke in a suit.
Which is why I mentioned Benson. I just like the idea of it being Benson from regular show. Just like an angry manager.
Yeah.
Which I think would be funny.
Shia thinks that we're not going to get a solid answer to Prismo's boss, and that it's going to be more metaphorical for. Oh yeah, what if just like straight up God shows up, like not globe or globular or whatever, but just God. I don't want that either.
I don't want the Christian God to be involved.
Just Jesus Christ shows up in Adventure Time.
That would be so whack.
That would be bad. Yeah, no, I'm totally joking about that. But no,
Toon, I figured that out, okay? I'm just saying, I want there to be a real F-bomb.
Yeah.
I want somebody to actually just say fuck. And I don't know who I want it to be. Yeah.
It is TV-14, so I doubt we're going to get any F-bombs.
Well, you kind of can. They're entitled to like one, I think.
Oh, is that the same for TV?
Yeah, I think they're entitled to one. I might be wrong on that, but I believe they might be.
It's got to be the perfect timing then. We got to use it strategically.
in X-Men First Class when they save the one F-bomb in the entire movie for the one scene Wolverine is in,
Yeah.
and they find him in a bar and they're like, "My name's Charles Xavier, and I'm Eric Lanshaw," and he just immediately, without hesitation, just goes, "Go fuck yourself," and then
Yeah.
that's the end of the scene.
Yeah.
I want it to be Marceline. If they have an F-bomb, I want it to be Marcy. But that belongs to
Mm,
Marcy. We all know it.
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Uh, and that would be very satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope we get more Marcy and
Yeah.
Bubblegum and all of them. I miss my
Yeah,
friends.
I want them to come back. That'd be awesome. Um, all right, I have one more plot related thing that I wanted to bring up.
Okay, I'm ready.
The Time Core.
It's
That
just a
was
couple of guys hitting each
that was
other.
that was kind of neat, right? First of all, I love the visual of it. Like the visuals are so cool. Like this white empty void room with just like these two clock beings just like
'Cause
banging each other with hammers, and
what
the
is it? You've got a sundial and
like an
an
hourglass.
hourglass
Yeah.
hitting each other.
And then like the
And
rainbow sparks like flying off of it looks so cool.
it's very like Sisyphus, isn't it? These two
Yeah.
beings whose just entire existence is to do this one thing forever.
Yeah, and it's like Prismo, like I don't even think they're alive. They're just sort of like doing it, right? But like I'm curious to know if that is going to come into play in the plot somehow. Is there going to be some sort of like time
It
shenanigans
really feels like
involved?
it will, doesn't it? Like that's
Like
such a
why would they
big
bring it
thing.
up, right? If it wasn't going to come into play, right? I don't know.
Well, as a great person once said, time is an illusion that helps
It's
things make sense.
true.
That's
It's
why we're
true.
always living in the present tense.
It's true. So yeah, I'm curious to know if anyone has any thoughts about the time core and if that's going to come into play somehow. Yeah, I don't know if there's just going to be some sort of like time shenanigans going on because we already got one time kind of loop in the show, which was the moment where Betty, right, came from the past into the future to complete
That's
that
not the
time
only
loop.
time loop we had.
Oh, is
That's
that
not the
not?
only time
What's
loop
the
we
other
had.
one?
No. The other one is Prismo's weird time nonsense to bring himself back.
That's right. Yeah, and then we
Remember
get
that?
like the new. Isn't it Jake that turns into Prismo, or is it? It's like a
I think it
paradox
was Jake.
Jake
Yeah, I
that
think it
turns
was
into
Jake.
Prismo, right? Yeah.
It was Charles in charge.
That's right.
It
Yeah,
was
so there's a
Judge
couple
Judy.
so there are a couple time shenanigans going on in Adventure Time, so it's possible that something like that could come into play here. How exactly would be curious. Like do you think it's possible for us to get a version of Simon and Ice King like both?
I would not write anything off at this point. And
Yeah, I don't know. It's curious.
in many ways, we've talked about the idea of like characters mirroring each other and how interesting it would be for certain characters to meet other characters. And I think seeing Ice King and Simon actually talk would be interesting.
Mm,
That said, time shenanigans with the time room, that feels very endgame to me because it's so
mm,
big, such a grand set piece.
right.
That seems like third act shiz, in my
Mm.
opinion.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see how that'll come into play. According to Gavin in the trailers, they had some time shifty stuff going on with the treehouse. I'll have to go back and watch the trailers. I don't
They
remember
do,
that,
yeah,
but
because it shifts between the tree house as we know it and the tree that's overgrown in the future, as we see it in Come Along With Me
right.
with friggin' Willow Smith.
Right. Oh,
Come on.
and Magical is right. That's also the episode where we got the Finn sword with Paradox Finn. I remember that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some time shenanigans potentially coming into play here, which I think is always fun and interesting. Curious to know how it'll play into the story. Let me just go through my notes and make sure I'm not missing anything, but I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. If you had anything else you wanted to bring up, Tom.
Can we talk about how
Now.
fucking good the music is?
Oh god, the music is so good. Did Rebecca Sugar write the song that we got in this episode? I don't actually know.
I don't know. I don't think so. I'd have to check the credits again. I
Yeah.
really, but I want to more than just the songs. We talked about the songs plenty.
Yeah.
Um, who is the lady who composes the music for this series?
Oh, I don't know. Does
Toon
anyone in the
Toon
chat
knows the
know?
name. Tune, give me the name. Who's the composer? Help me. Help
I feel
me.
so bad for Toon. He's just like in our chat, and he's supposed to be like our question answer. Like, hey Toon, who did this?
Tune,
But
help.
we really appreciate it, Toon. You are awesome, and we appreciate you being in the chat. So thank you.
Help me. Yeah, I keep like, but more than just the songs, because we talked about the songs plenty, but
Yeah,
the non-lyrical
yeah,
music
like the score. Yeah,
is really good. Like I love the main title theme. It's really cool with like the funky baritone sax. It's so cool.
yeah,
But like the actual just like scene to scene dramatic orchestral score
yeah.
is really interesting and really cool. Um, and I pointed out to both you and Toon there's a specific musical sting
Yes.
that appears right at the end of episode 4 when they're in a cornfield. And this is also starting to, the cornfield also kind of reminds me of Interstellar. Like there's a lot of bits in this that remind me of Interstellar, except better than Interstellar because, Interstellar sucks. But there's a very specific musical sting, like a really creepy musical sting that is really hard to describe, which is kind of like a little chorus of trumpets kind of doing a weird what sounds like just a cluster of random dissonant notes, which I know it's not, but it's purposefully meant to sound that way because it's meant to sound really creepy. Um, and I was listening to that, like I recognize that from somewhere, and I don't specifically know where. And then it clicked in my head that I had recognized it from a scene in Fargo season 2,
Clutch your
the
bingo
first
cards. We're talking
episode.
about Fargo.
Don't judge me. There's a scene right at the end of episode 1 of season 2. I don't know if anybody in chat's seen Fargo or seen Fargo season 2, but the scene right at the end of that episode when Ed Blumquist kills Ry Gerhardt in his garage, and he finds him there, and the light is flickering. Listen out for that sound of the trumpet doing that weird dissonant little blah. Sounds really
Yeah.
weird. And I was trying to think like where does that come from? And I think, and I'm sure there will be music theorists who know more than I do who can maybe correct me here. I think it's a Jerry Goldsmith thing.
Hmm.
Um, Jerry Goldsmith being one of those like legendary Hollywood composers who sort of not quite as much as John Williams, but did kind of define like the Hollywood soundscape in many ways. You have these composers who crop up throughout history who really define what movies sound like for a period. John
Mm-hmm.
Williams uses the French horn, and that kind of created that whole sound. And
Mm.
Hans Zimmer has his bois.
Right.
That everybody really wants to use the bois to make things sound dramatic. Jerry Goldsmith just loved the trumpet. He was all about the trumpet.
Yeah.
And Jerry Goldsmith, you'll recognize from having done the score for Chinatown.
Mm.
But he also did the score for Gremlins and The Secret of Nim and
Mm.
what else? The Omen. Just like a whole bunch of like really big movies over the course of like 20, 30 years. He was a big composer, did the music for LA Confidential and just a whole load of really big movies. And I think that sting, that like creepy trumpet sting, I think I recognize from some of his work.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's kind of a neat little thing to bring into it. And I'm not
Totally.
sure. I'm curious to know if we'll kind of see that crop up, that little sting crop up.
Yeah, no, totally. I really like what Shia said in the chat here where she says I like it being associated with chaos or dissonance, right? And I feel like
Mm.
that's definitely something that they're playing with in Fiona and Cake. And kind of along those lines too, right? Like we haven't really talked about the intro sequence, the music in the intro sequence, and that's very trumpet heavy too, right? And it's awesome. I love the
It's
intro sequence. The music
yeah,
is so interesting. It's
it's
like
just it's like a brass section basically
yeah.
though.
Yeah, it's so
Um,
it's so unlike anything that like is traditional, right? Like it's got all these
yeah.
weird harmonies and yeah, it's just very cool I'm a big fan of the
Gavin,
music in general.
what are you asking? What is what about? I would like to answer your question. I'm just not sure what you're asking. What
Uh
is what?
Possibly Fargo?
possibly Fargo. I hope it's Fargo because then I get to talk about Fargo for a little bit
Um, but
within
yeah,
the time frame before you have to leave.
yeah. Because you brought up Fargo and you brought up Blade Runner, I have to bring up Buffy
You're
at
gonna have to
least
bring up
once.
Buffy.
Once.
Obviously, those are the
I
rules.
have one note where I brought up Buffy, and that was okay. So in season 5 of Buffy, again, sorry everyone, this is just me. In season 5 of Buffy, there is a plot that goes on, and I won't spoil it for anyone in the chat who hasn't seen it yet. But Tom, you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's a plot in Buffy season 5 where a character, a person, is a significant magical item that a villain is looking for, right? And the villain doesn't know that this magical item is a person. And there's
And the person does not know that they are a magical item.
And the person doesn't know that they're the magical item, right? But there's another character that knows it, and he accidentally lets it slip up to one of the henchmen at one point. He's like, I'm not going to turn in an innocent. And then he gets like, he cuts himself off, right? And realizing that he slipped up, being like, oh, so you said innocent. That must mean that the thing is a person, right? And he accidentally like gives that away. There's a moment in Fionna and Cake that reminded me of that, which was the moment where the Scarab was interrogating Prismo about the unauthorized universe. And Prismo was like, you'll never find him. And Scarab is like, oh, you mean to say that the unauthorized universe is inside of a person? And I was like, why does that remind me of Buffy?
That's got to be purposeful, right?
It's a reference. It's an intentional reference. Everything is connected to Buffy.
Prismo went full Dr. Manhattan this episode, didn't he? Like being in more than one place at once and having like multiple conversations with people. And
totally.
Fargo, I'm actually not sure how to describe what Fargo is about because it's an anthology series, so every season is about a different thing. It's kind of, Fargo is comparable to Infinity Train in that sense, where there are like loose connections between every season. But they're only loose. It's not like one directly follows another, and they typically skip across time as well, where you'll have one season that's set in 2006 and another that's set in 1979 and whatever. Fargo is just like probably the best live action television show still airing today. It's really, really, really good. It's a neo-noir crime thriller comedy that kind of every season focuses on some kind of inciting incident, some kind of like small town or big town crime that happens that leads to a bunch of mishaps and this, that, and the other, usually dragging innocent people into it and changing people's lives forever, mostly for the worst. But yeah, go watch Fargo. It's incredible, but watch the film first.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's like a continuation of a Coen Brothers film from 1996 of the same name, which is one of the best films ever made. It's phenomenal.
According to Magical, Cake Song in episode 3 was written by Rebecca Sugar. So
yay.
There you have it. And actually I can totally see that too, because there were some of the lines where like Rebecca Sugar has this like talent with like lyrics and cadence and rhythm. There's like that moment where Cake is like, something so serious, it must be so delirious. And there was something about that rhyme that just like felt a little Rebecca Sugary to me. So yeah, I can totally see that Rebecca wrote that song. She's
Rebecca Salt.
Amazing.
I just like seeing Rebecca Sugar do things.
Rebecca is doing a live stream next week. She's doing a concert.
I know. Yeah.
I don't know when that is going to be, but whenever it's going to be, we're not going to be doing our stream during that same time because we are for sure going to be watching Rebecca's stream. So
I don't think it's going to be happening at a time when I'll be awake, but I don't know for sure. Usually they don't do stuff while us English people are awake, because English people aren't real is the thing.
They just don't exist.
English people aren't real. No one outside of the United States is real. We're all imaginary. The only time zone that exists is whatever time zones are in the American.
Exactly. Yeah. The rest of the world just doesn't exist.
The rest of the world isn't real.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a good place for us to wrap things up, unless you had anything else you wanted to add before we conclude for the day.
The only thing I want to add is a cup of tea and my tummy.
That sounds
the only thing I want to add.
Ideal.
I'm sorry to everybody who had to look up my nostrils last week. I've corrected.
Oh my god!
I've got
I don't
my
think
laptop
anyone noticed.
Currently propped on a couple of things so that it's like actually at my eye level, and I'm not like
Yeah.
I'm not like that guy from South Park, the
Oh
man
my
with no
gosh.
life. You know the one.
Yeah, so next week, it's going to be Sunday. We will be continuing our discussion stream. I think Rebecca's stream is going to be like later in the evening, so we'll probably just go back to
Yeah.
our normal time. We'll probably actually go back to our normal time at 11 as well too, instead of at 10, because
There is no way I'm going to be awake at 8 to 10 p.m. EST. That's probably going to be like
right.
5 a.m. for me.
Yeah. But for our stream next week, we'll probably go back to our usual time at 11 PST, which will be
Yeah.
an hour later from today. It's just that today I had some plans, so that's the only reason we started earlier. But next week we'll go back to our usual time at 11. And yeah, Rebecca has some sort of announcement at the end of.
People are going to someone's going to need to clip this for me so I can actually see.
Yeah, we'll clip it and share it with you. Don't worry.
You have plans with a friend, which is code for smuggling honey badgers.
Yeah, I actually have an elaborate heist
between France and Spain. You've got 3 trucks full of honey badgers that you need to fence off.
Don't give away all my secrets on stream, Tom. Come on.
That's too late.
Come on, you should know better.
We're all wise to you. We're not stupid.
No, my
You've got a flight to catch.
Yeah, I gotta go run to the airport now.
And you're just going to be taking hundreds of honey badgers with you. They're like,
what can I say?
Cases and cases full of. You've got like 6 or 7 honey badgers stuffed into every case.
It's just a casual Sunday for me. What can I say?
They make a lot of money these days.
We all gotta make ends meet. Yes, all my smuggling operations. But yeah, thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful rest of your week. We will catch you all next week to talk about episodes 5 and 6, which will be exciting, good stuff. We hope to see you there. Thank you again
see you all
for tuning in. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.